Luigi, are you ready to? Are you raring to go?
Yes, I'm as ready as how I can be.
Yeah.
Can you hear me right?
I can hear you. I should pretend I can't really, shouldn't I? Just no. Honestly, I can hear you nice and clearly. Yeah,
Okay.
over to you. Over to you. You're going to read some poetry for us, aren't you, Luigi?
Yeah, well, see, it's always a problem trying to choose something to read because, I try to write something fairly humorous, you see, but sometimes the editors don't like that, you see. So I've chosen a couple that the editors have actually liked and cherished, you see.
Well,
So,
that's a rich tapestry that is ABC. Yep, go for it. Over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I've chosen a couple, you see. One is because a lot of times people ask me, what inspires you to write? So I chose this one here, which is entitled The Storyteller.
Thank
you. Here he goes. It wasn't Ernest Hemingway that inspired me to write, but the shrewd Scheherazade of 1001 Night. She kept the Sultan enthralled with tales that were first class. To fend off his murderous intent, I wish that I met this lass. I would have been mesmerized by her sweet-sounding voice and enraptured by her beauty if I had been given the choice. It must have been an ordeal to be up all night, in the harem, trying hard to remain alive, though a prospect was slim. The ruler had been badly hurt by the unfaithful first wife. He married again many times, but every wife lost her life. Scheherazade was also meant to be on the list and get the chop. It's definitely not, she exclaimed. The perversion has got to stop. She didn't use a sledgehammer to crack this troublesome nut. Just a never-ending storytelling of lovely tales devoid of smut. With a cliffhanger on every yarn, tantalizing, she held the suspense, thus relaxing the tough situation that up to then had been very tense. At the end of the Thousand Nights, her eloquent tongue dried up, yet the loss of absorbing narrative did not lose the marital breakup. The Sultan realized at long last it made no sense to punish her. As she was obviously talented, she ought to be looking for a publisher. I'm sorry about the diction, I'm getting on a bit in age.
Not at all, Luigi. Here you read. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to read another one or not?
Yeah, let's have one more, and then I'll bring Sean in.
Okay, lovely. Yeah.
Thank you, Luigi.
This is a recent one, which was inspired by an inspiration point, which was entitled Letters.
Okay.
In Italy, we got a saying that we're all doctors, siamo tutti dottori, because every title has got doctor attached to it, you see. So, this is called Letters After One's Name. I have friends and relations with letters after their name, and some of them achieved a modicum of fame. One uncle is a surveyor whose designation is Freaks. An expert on structural issues, he assesses mortar and bricks. A cousin of mine is a scientist who prefers to work in a lab instead of an academic career. He is a Master of Science, Cantab. Another cousin, once removed, with whom I have no affinity, and has become a clergyman, is a Bachelor of Divinity. My clever niece recently got a first-class medical degree and can describe herself quite correctly as an MD. As far as I'm concerned, I put my cards on the table and have to honestly admit that I don't have any label. I'm just an ordinary mister with no designation to affix to my curriculum vitae and or to my vacuous suffix. I'm philosophical, all right, but don't claim to be a D-Phil. My life is quite uneventful. In fact, it is run of the mill. A few of my friends got an OBE, but don't be, and yet I might realize an impossible dreams and one day become a knight. That's it. It's me.
Excellent. Love that. Thank you, Luigi.
Thank you.
And you'll see some nice comments as well coming in there. So thank you.
Okay.
Really.
Yeah, I don't know.
You've even got
Yeah,
a virtual. You've got a virtual clap there as well. So.
Oh yes, I can see that. But where do I get the comments? I can't see
so
them.
if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a little square chat box, like a speech bubble. If you click on that,
Oh yes.
if you click on,
all right,
you'll see the chat box.
Yeah, I see.
Right.
Okay.
Sean, can I come to you next? Sean McNulty.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you very clear.
I'm coming through okay. I had problems with sound earlier, but okay.
All right, over to you, Sean.
Well, okay. I'm fine, am I? You can hear me?
I can hear you beautifully. If I can't hear you, I'll come in.
Okay. I will read a short poem, very short poem, and then a short story, very short story. The poem is called Lunar New Year Evening. After glasses of Baijo, the emphatic gambes, and gift of a blood-red envelope, licked, I guessed, by golden dragons and issued by clouds, whose contents would prove later useful for settling certain hospital bills, we went outside the restaurant and the academics teach grappling techniques and other hits from the secret fighting arts of their forefathers. It was a beautiful Lunar New Year Eve. That's that short poem. And let me see. And I have a story. And so last year I wrote many short stories about childhood, about 3 11-year-old boys. And this is one of those stories. It's called, and you'll have to pardon the accent that I put on here. It's the accent that I had as a boy, and it's notorious. It has actually been named the worst accent in Ireland on multiple occasions. So you have been warned. So hurry, men. Me friend Dixon's go a wino, a sour ale size too. We all know it. Now here he is lying in a heap along Legion Avenue. I seen him home from the pubs early in the day before, but I've never seen him like this. He's slumped against a wall and there's a super value bag beside him with a box of the shop's own crispy pancakes. It seems like he's tried to eat one of them still frozen, 'cause there's one at his feet with a clumsy bite mark in it. There's nothing to do but go help him up. But when he comes to, he does so with a bang and hits me such a clout. Sure, I'm only trying to help you, mister. Go away and fuck, he splutters. I pick up the crispy pancakes and put them in the bag. There's also some sausages and a pint of milk in there. Yeah. The Dixons live the other end of Cox's domain, which is too far now for him to walk or for me to try helping him. Call home, me spits. Call me house. I realise we're near McSweeney Street, where there's a phone box, so I help him up and we walk in that direction. I have to hold him as we trip along the cracked pavement. He smells pretty bad, fags and booze, and dare say piss. It's hard having the car, but if Chuck Norris did it in Missing in Action High, I can do it too, I suppose. Anyway, we're not that far and we get there eventually. This phone box well. It's how we make phone come. Mr. Dixon did in a phone call dude. Pray and he calls home and someone comes to get him. But I hope it's not me friend Dixon who picks up the phone. Pray someone else answers and comes to get him. Dixon to know that I found his father lying in the street. Because that's kind of embarrassing, Dad, isn't it? I'm glad my mother and father don't get on like this, a fair bit of drinking themselves. I wonder what it is that makes people go from just a few drinks to a regular hip on the ground. Because they're not all at it, some of them. Just some wind-up heaps on the ground, which is sad. Mr. Dixon used to be a town. He was a rock star in the 70s, and he stayed that way right up until only a few years ago. His band was called the Hurrymen. Mr. Dixon, they played all the hits from back in the day. Now, I heard they were crap myself, but sure, what would I know about all that? I've seen pictures of Mr. Dixon wearing a red suit and black tie, and with a haircut like your man Alvin Stardust. Now he's just a heap on the ground. Who's that? Oh, Mary. Mary, is it? Mary, love. It's me. It's your daddy. Where are you? Oh, yeah, you're home. Did you do your homework, Mary? We'll do it, but not now, Mary. I don't know where am I? On McSweeney Street, to remind him. Mary, I'm on McSweeney Street. Where's the rest? Can you go next door to Sam, love, and tell him, Sweeney Sammy, come pick me up. What? No, I'm in the telephone. Tell him to hurry up. After he puts the receiver down, Mr. Dixon slides the phone box and slowly slides down the inner wall of it. Mr. Dixon, don't fall asleep in there, I say. Someone might want to use the phone. Go away and fuck. I wanted to go home, but I decided to hang about until the person he called for comes to collect him. If it all collect him, I'll give it 10 minutes and see. He starts singing after a while, like in the old days, and I stand back, welcome to the Hotel Calala. Such a lovely place, such a lovely I endure 6 minutes of this shite, and then a wee brown Ford parks nearby. A man gets out and starts to approach the phone box. Harry Aaron sweater on, swanky looking shoes, hair like Padjo the puppet off the telly. Right, boss, he says to me. I did. I found him up there on Legion Avenue. Good man yourself. I'm Sammy. I'm the drummer. Sammy goes into his pockets and takes out a £1 note. My heart skips a beat. There you go, son. Take that for your troubles. Thanks, mister. As I'm clearing off, I can hear Mr. Dixon say, go away and fuck again, as Sammy helps him out of the phone box. As you hear people say all the time around here, but Mr. Dixon's going to make it his own at this rate. I go into the sweet shop in Culhane Street near to buy 2 Stinger bars and a packet of Space Raiders with the £1 Sammy gave me, and there's still loads left after. Then I go home and stick his album, and as I'm listening to the old songs, I make a solemn swear to myself that if I ever join a band in the future, I'm going to be the drummer. The end.
Love it, Sean. Superb. Check out Sean's stories about childhood on ABC. They're all brilliant. Okay. Right. Who would like to go next? Rhiannon.
Okay.
How are you ready to go?
Yes, okay.
Okay. All right. I will pass over to you. Thank you.
I've just chosen a few old children orientated little ones. First of all, a 5-year-old's bedroom. I open my eyes, and what do I see? My own little world that is just for me. The curtains whose shapes and figures I weave into stories of heroes and make-believe. The cupboards and drawers full of ever so much, bundles of clothes, special stones and such. Bits of old toys that I use in a way that's different from what the instructions say. The shelves with my books, some I've had for so long. The newer ones haven't yet grown to belong. A fort from a box which contained once a fridge. My brother's old bricks for the railway line's bridge. I love all our house, but this is my space. This is my corner, the bestest place. And then 2 little pieces from my time helping a family with Home Start. Twins were expected, and one seemed to have hydrocephalus. I think they'd even been offered an abortion for one of the twins. This is one, but wonderfully the condition had more or less finished clearing up by birth, and she's a real live wire rushing around, so her mother couldn't keep her all quiet and cushioned up. The first one is connected with the fact that she didn't want her hand held, but I couldn't run as fast as she could. Caring restraint. I'll hold your hand for your own good. You cannot see the things that could be dangerous, hurt, or make you fall. I'll hold your hand while you are small. I'll hold your hand until I know when I shout stop, you will not go, but come if called, at once return. I'll hold your hand until you learn. And this little one, on prematurely awakening from a car nap, a 2 or 3-quarter-year-old. I fell asleep in the car, but it really wasn't quite far enough. I suddenly woke as if I'd been given a prod or a poke. I felt all groggy and thick in the head. So I'm mournfully moaning and groaning instead of smiling, so everyone else can feel miserable too. Until I forget and find something to do. Sometimes a biscuit or drink makes me shake out of my misery, properly awake, ready for having a load of good fun. I'll shout and I'll jump and rush out and run. Take care, they say. What a bother and fuss. But I guess I don't like the look of that bus. And lastly, last Sunday, my 3-year-old granddaughter was showing me her soft toy called Arnie the Aardvark. And I was asking her what noise aardvarks make, because we've been talking about animal noises. Neither of us knew, so I looked it up, and apparently the aardvark is a rather quiet animal, I heard on Google. However, it does make soft grunting sounds as it forages and loud grunts as it makes for its tunnel entrance. It makes a bleating sound if frightened, which sounded a bit like a mixture between a pig and a lamb. And then I remembered I had a poem about aardvarks. A is for aardvark. With a nose like a pig, though longer, it's stronger and able to dig. Its burrow is made at speeds that exceed 6 men who are digging quite fast with a spade. Has a tail like a rat, but ears like a donkey. It can hold them quite wonky. Underground they fold flat. Its olfactory sense is very intense. Its claws make attacks on termite nests look so simple. Their walls would challenge a pickaxe, not easy to crack. With a swipe and a lick, ants, termites will stick to the 1-foot-long tongue, and this it can roll to poke in a hole. Its teeth are unique, while its sensitive nose is guarded by bristles, and its nostrils can close when digging. No freak, but such odd, funny creatures with remarkable features. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannonw. I think I now want an aardvark. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And again, do check the comments that are coming into chat function. It's lovely to see. Okay. Miraculously, we seem to be kind of on time. Lem, could I bring you in next, if that's okay? If you could unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you very clearly. Actually, really good
Oh,
sound.
good.
I know.
Hello from Germany, everybody.
Yeah, welcome. Okay, I'll pass the floor over to you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to read a short story of mine called The Uninvited. I am sitting on the stoop of my little whitewashed hut. The day is still, sepia-toned. All sounds are mere suggestions, filtering into my consciousness from worlds away. Desiccated husks of old leaves litter the ground. The mug I turn idly between my palms is empty, a cylinder of sun-warmed ceramic. I don't know how long I've been waiting here, an hour, an eternity, but I do know he's coming. The iron grey clouds tell me that much. As does the heaviness draining all relief from the breeze. It's an effort just to breathe. Dull sweat pricks at my hairline. It will be a relief when the storm breaks, no matter the damage. Just as I'm thinking of going indoors, a long shadow falls across my bare feet. My uninvited guest looks a tad surprised to find me waiting for him, to the extent that a non-corporeal entity can look surprised, that is. Hiya, I say jauntily, throwing in a little wave for spice. I'll pop the kettle on. Suspicion crackles like static in the sultry air. What's going on? You aren't usually nearly this hospitable. That's a fair point. Normally I ignore the doorbell, pretend he's not there, though his gaze penetrates the walls as he waits, expressionless in the darkness. Also, I don't even drink tea, but it's never too late to try something new. I didn't get the vacuum out for him though. That would be taking things a bit too far. So, here we are again. He's made himself comfy in the good chair. I scratch my nose, wondering how long he'll stay. He says, I rather like it here, so forever, possibly. If I had a quid for every time you said that, I could pay for enough therapy to banish you forever. No, this time I mean it. Yep, okay, I believe you. Silence. I pick up a book. Instant mockery ensues. You know you won't enjoy that, he says, not while I'm here. Slowly, deliberately, I put the book down. Then I cross the room in 2 strides, grab my headphones, ram them over my ears and turn up the volume until it hurts. The room fills with black smoke. Tension throbs in my temples. New words bloom across the page like bloodstains in cloth. You are a complete and utter embarrassment of a human being, a monumental failure on every single level, a drain on your family, your friends, society, the worst person who has ever lived. You should rid the world of the scourge of your existence. Yet you don't even have the common decency to kill yourself, coward. Exasperated, I press pause. Has anyone ever told you how much of an attention whore you are? Because my God, you are such an attention whore. His empty eyes look through me. Why don't you just slit your wrists and be done with it? Take an overdose. You have everything you need here. I slam the book shut. You know what? I'm going to bed. There is a hole in the wall of the cabin. My guest and I sit face to place where face should be at the breakfast table. My hands are curled defensively around a steaming mug of coffee. I didn't sleep well last night. In fact, I spent most of it crying into my pillow, accompanied by my purpose-made YouTube playlist of Samuel Barber. But that was a blip. I can definitely still turn this around. One day, I say conversationally, reaching for the jam, it'll be the very last time you cross this threshold. I take a sip of coffee and I'm rewarded with a foam moustache. And every single time could be that time. One midnight cloaked non-shoulder rises in a lazy half shrug. Well, he says, you're not wrong. You could even speed up the process if you were to kill yourself. Ugh, I say, again with the suicide stuff? Seriously, it's getting old. Emo was so mid to late 2000s. My guest doesn't answer. He merely extends an intangible hand. The air around it grows chill. My breath billows dragon-like before me. If his hand existed, there would be a wedding band of blackest night around its skeletal ring finger. He says, "Have you forgotten that we're bound together for eternity?" I think of suffering friends and stare bitterly into my mug. Well, you're a serial polygamist in that case. Do I not ever return to you from my banishment? Am I not loyal to you? Yeah, I say, but I'm not loyal to you. A broad grin spreads across my face, slow as sunrise. In fact, I'm a filthy slut for happiness. Astonishment abruptly rends the black curtain, casting the kitchen in unstable light. I absolutely howl with laughter. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Each time my uninvited guest leaves, he takes away something from me. Some time, an opportunity, or a happy memory. He likes shiny things. But it's okay. I keep stoking my fire. I might lose the odd fight, but I'm winning the war. Bye, I sing song. Don't let the door hit you on your way out. As I'm turning, he grabs me by the throat. His words fall like cold stones into the deep well of my mind. You think you can keep me away with your pills, your words, your music, your friends. You think you can outwit me, outrun me, evade me. But I'll be back before you've even realized I've gone. As you grow and change, so do I. I am your constant companion. I am always one step behind you. One day you will learn to accept my love. One day you will give me your all. One day we shall be as one. But it is not love, I whisper. It was never love. And between blinks, depression fades away. I'm sitting on the stoop once more. A light rain freckles the pavement, intensifying by the second. I tilt my face towards it like a flower, cleansing me, healing me. Tonight I will sleep soundly. The storm has broken. Thank you.
Thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. Loved some of the turns of phrase in that. A light rain freckles the pavement. Brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks. That means a lot.
Great stuff. Okay. Right. Next up. I should sound like I know what I'm doing, really, shouldn't I? Ross Lowe. If I could come. Hello there. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me along.
No, whereabouts? You're in Germany as well, aren't you?
Yes, Berlin. Yeah.
Berlin.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read a short chapter from a novel I've written. It's an unpublished novel. It's called "Step Forward, Harry Salt." And basically the storyline, the way that the storyline's delivered, there's two timelines. There are flashbacks, which are in the form of dreams from Harry's childhood, and there's Harry in the modern day. And this is one of the early flashbacks from his childhood. And the chapter's called Garden. And there it is again, that feeling of complete, unbroken serenity. Far away in the distance, although I can't see them from here, a long procession of cars sits patiently in line on the motorway, waiting for the hot summer sun to turn each individual one momentarily into a gleaming silver jewel containing a mum, a dad, 2 kids, and a boot overpacked with holiday clothes. If I were upstairs in my bedroom, I'd be able to look away over the fields and trees beyond to see this giant metal snake, excited in the knowledge that, in 2 weeks' time, I'd be a part of that parade to the coast too. I know I've got 2 weeks left because my dad, ever the creative sort, made a little calendar for my wall last weekend with 21 days on it and holiday countdown emblazoned across the top in neat red pencil crayon. Each night he comes in and, with his best rollerball and pen and ruler, he draws a cross diagonally through the box bearing that day's date in its center. So far, 7 have gone, leaving 14 remaining enticingly. But I'm not up in my bedroom right now. I'm in the garden, wearing my shorts and my favorite blue and red t-shirt, pushing my weather-beaten tricycle round and round in a circle, humming a tune about chickens and deck chairs that I'd heard on the radio that morning. I'd been sitting on the kitchen step, talking to Grandma about astronomy as she did the post-breakfast washing up. She, Grandpa, or sometimes both of them, would come over and help when my dad was busy with his projects. Russell Grant, I'd told her, He's really clever. He can see into space with his telescope and uses diagrams to predict the future. My favourite is Aries. I liked him much more than Patrick Moore because he was less frightening and wore nicer, more colourful jumpers, although he did seem to know less about the Giotto probe that the European Space Agency was sending up to Halley's Comet. I wasn't even sure that he could play the xylophone either. Dad was very excited about this event too, almost as much as he was about our holiday, and he promised that I could stay up late with a sleeping bag.
Sorry, Ross, you've gone on mute. Ross.
Hello.
Sorry, yeah, that's
back.
Yeah, you're back. If you go back to
no idea what happened there. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
What was the last bit you heard? Can you still hear me?
Sorry, I've just.
Hello.
Just go back one paragraph and
yes, certainly.
Perfect. Then that'd be perfect. Thank you.
I liked Russell Grant much more than Patrick Moore because he was less frightening and wore nicer, more colourful jumpers, although he did seem to know less about the Giotto probe that the European Space Agency was sending up into Halley's Comet. I wasn't even sure that he could play the xylophone either. Dad was very excited about this event too, almost as much as he was about our holiday, and he promised that I could stay up late with a sleeping bag and watch it live on the BBC with him from the living room floor. I'd told Grandma about this too, and I'd said that I hoped Russell Grant would be presenting the coverage from inside the probe, but she'd just carried on with the pots in the sink. Being careful not to ride over my dad's neatly manicured and colourful flower borders, I pushed my trike into the shaded area behind the garage and stared up into the bright blue sky above. 2 white vapour trails formed a giant X, and for a moment again, I was giddily reminded of both my forthcoming holiday and Halley's Comet. From one of the gardens up the road, I could hear the faint beat of someone's car stereo and snatches of animated conversation from someone's house, where they must have had the back doors open like ours to cope with the irrepressible heat. As I lifted my leg to climb off my trike, my shorts tightened slightly, and I felt something pressing into the outside of my thigh. Of course, it was a red boiled sweet in a clear plastic wrapper given to me by my grandpa the previous week. I stood up, took it from my pocket, and began to unwrap it. Not easy, as the combined heat from the summer sun and my tricycle powering thigh had made it very sticky, so extra concentration and fingernail skill were required to peel it off. While reflecting on what a good thing it was that I didn't chew my nails like some of the other children at school, a sudden movement in the bush to my left made me jump and stand rigid, my wrapper peeling hand switching to grip one of the handlebars tightly, while the other clasped the sweet. A large black dog's head had emerged from under the hedge, and it was gazing directly at me, panting slowly, with its pink, ham-like tongue and sharp white teeth in stark contrast to its jet black fur. I stood petrified, rooted to the spot. I hadn't seen this dog before. It wasn't from here. We didn't have a dog, and I didn't know anybody on our street who did either. A feeling of hot and absolute terror was already oozing its way through my body, a liquid electricity that made every fibre of my being stand alert, giving my perception a sudden and frightening clarity. The dog drew in its tongue, ready to bark. Screaming at the top of my voice, I hurled the sweet at the dog's head, just as it bared its ivory white and glistening teeth. I turned and ran. Upon turning, I heard from behind me the sound of the sweet I had so looked forward to seconds previously, making contact with the dog's teeth, like a small pebble striking a ceramic tile. But I didn't turn to look, and I had no idea how close the pursuing dog was to me. All I was focused on was getting into the arms of my suddenly worried-looking grandma, who had come out from the kitchen and was stood facing me as I ran as fast as I could towards her. And that's it.
That's great, Ross. Definitely would like to read more of that. Yeah, hopefully we'll be seeing more of that on ABCtales in the near future. Great voice. Okay, and apologies for the sound blip there as well, but well recovered. Okay, again, lots of lovely feedback coming in. If I could pass over to LittleRedHat.
Hi everyone, first time reader, so I'm a little bit nervous. Please just call me Red. So what I'm reading tonight is a few poems from my collection Inferno Revisited, which is a modern reimagining, reworking of Dante's Inferno. And I've tried to emulate his terza rima style. This isn't in any way meant to like disrespect Dante's Inferno. I think it's an amazing poem, but there was a lot of views in it that I don't necessarily agree with. So this is like my modern take on it. We're going to start with Circle 2, which is the Circle of the Lustful. We saw her painted face, the clothes she wore. We called from every corner of the street. A girl who looks like that must be a whore. She was a prize to win, a toy, a treat. When she said no, the word we heard was yes. She's teasing us, these sluts all know the score. Why else would she be wearing that short dress? We remained deaf to her protests and cries. Unwanted words placed her under duress. We feasted on her with ravenous eyes. To her, a torture, but to us, a game. You chose to dress like that. Why the surprise? We're sinners, yes, but no, we share the blame with anyone. But no, we share the shame with anyone who thinks that she's to blame. This is the next. I'm skipping ahead to the second section of Circle 8, which houses the flatterers. With dazzling spotlight shining in their eyes, we followed at their feet like loyal hounds, disguised all truth and dressed them up in lies, for telling a great story knows no bounds. Longing for fame, we gave them what they craved. They dominated images and sounds until the day they finally misbehaved. Once honoured names dragged howling through the mud, those blessed ones now monstrous and depraved. We crushed them in whatever way we could, smearing their souls, exposing every vice. Those loyal hounds soon turned once they'd smelt blood. Success meant scandal, no one gained from nice. And here we pay just as they paid their price. There's finally the third part of the 8th circle. Originally housed the sin of simony, which was the buying and selling of holy offices. Not really a relevant thing in the modern age. So if you can imagine, this is one of those weird telemarketing ads you sometimes see at 6 a.m. I would do it in an American accent, but I can't. So again, one of those weird telemarketing thing you see at 6 a.m. I hope the idea comes across. Hey, listen up. We have one awesome deal for all you lucky folks. Don't touch that dial. God loves you. Yes, he does. His love is real. To prove it, he gave us this little vial of holy healing juice. Just drink 2 drops before each meal. It's bound to make you smile. Our Lord and Saviour pulls out all the stops in terms of merchandise. For just $10 and $2 postage, this stuff is tops. It cures all illness. Doctors, they're schmucks. Call now and we'll send a free gift your way. Our newest prayer beads, Rosary Deluxe. We accept cards and checks, so don't delay, because God loves you as long as you pay.
Yeah. Rosary Deluxe. Yeah, fantastic reading. So thank you for that. Okay, let's have a little break there, and then if we could come back at 5 past, and then Francis, I know you've joined us.
Yes,
so I'll start with you. No, it's quite great that you can make it. It wouldn't be technology, would it, unless there was a little bit of trauma. But thank you everyone who read during that first session. Again, it's a variety, isn't it? And it's great to put faces to names. So right, actually let's start. Francis, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. I had real trouble getting connected tonight. But I think it's probably my computer, not your end. I'm not sure.
Well, you're not being clear. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I did my first reading last time, and emboldened by that, I decided to make a podcast with a granddaughter who's a sound engineer. So I was quite pleased with that. I sent Mark a copy of that, so that's available if anybody's interested. I've got 2 or 3 short pieces here. And I must confess to being really quite political. I did a politics degree a long while ago, and so a lot of my stuff is about that. One of the pieces isn't, you'll be pleased to hear. But this first piece is called Death in Southall, April 1979. A teacher died in Southall this week on his way home from a demonstration. He was a quiet man protesting his dislike of racists. Law and order is what we need, said the police. Give us more guns and riot shields and truncheons so that we can protect the public and have a little fun and excitement instead of your boring old hello, hello, hello. Teachers are required by the edicts of the Big Red Book to point out the immorality of racism and to do their best to provide equally for rich and poor, black and white. Now the teachers learned another lesson. You cannot walk the streets in search of truth without fear of being beaten to death by the police. What happened to the kind old Bobby who saw you across the road and told you the time? He too has become organised, mechanised, transistorised, terrorised, and he too has learned to defend himself and his fears by attacking a teacher on his way home from a demonstration. The politicians condemn the troublemakers and tell the police what a good job they are doing. Who condemned the killing of the teacher on his way home from a demonstration? Too many teachers anyway. Always get another one. Now that was written after the death of Blair Peach, which some of you may recognise. The second one is quite cynical again. And it's called Not in My Backyard, and this was written in 1987. Elections are such funny things, they make you want to weep. We'll give you this, we'll help with that. But in the end, it's naught but chat. For once they are returned to power, the schools will close and nuclear waste can once more be dropped into a shallow grave. But not in my backyard. The nurses too, will give them more, but once we're in, they're out the door and soon they can sweep up the floor of overcrowded NHS hospitals, or alternatively, they can go private. Yes, please, in my backyard. So north and south, the great divide, it isn't true, the Telegraph cried. They're doing very well up there. There's plenty of clogs and football teams and beer, and unemployment and nuclear power stations and Sellafield and leukemia, but certainly we can't have all that in our backyard. So vote for us, we'll do you proud. If you are rich and greedy and loud and sharp and spiffy and wear green wellies and pretend to be a yuppie in Brixton, yes, we'll look after you. For we too once were young and ambitious and prepared to do anything to get what we wanted. Yes, please, in my backyard. And we did do anything, including using MI5 and other civil servants to undermine governments we didn't like. For we had read the history books. And we could see how the Germans and the Romans got all they wanted by thieving and cheating and lying and killing. We thought that was exactly what we had wanted in our backyard. Finally, change of scene. This one I wrote a long while ago when I went to a creative writing course. I'm not really good at going to creative writing courses, I must confess. But anyway, this one we were given various scenarios and then asked to write it up as a poem, as a piece of prose, and as a newspaper article. This is called Metal Box, and this is the poem. Round and round and round she traversed, looking at the metal box, at the dash and blue interior, hints of dog hairs, little clocks. Was it really? Could it be? After all these empty years, looking closer at the number, checking, yes, it clearly was, Old Faithful, where it all had happened, where her life had been played out. Sitting in the front, she conjured how well it all had been. Memory returned at once as how he could no longer cope, how the family had suffered, how for him it had gone sour, how his job was now at risk and that he could go on no more. Round and round the metal box, lost in thought so long ago, how she wished it had been piled up on some dark and wintry night, with its owner in the front seat, terrified and stiff with fright. But perhaps on more reflection, it was best it was that way. So the little metal box would go on. C'est la vie, the French would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. People have absolutely loved those. A nice comment from Ross here. Absolutely bang on. Loved it, Francis. People want more. So listen to the podcast. We need to get a link sent round, won't we? Because it's a brilliant interview. It's really interesting. And I think you for the political poems, you were saying how looking back at these, it's rather sort of unsettling how things haven't changed. So I really enjoyed
Indeed. Yes, you've got the link, haven't you, Mark? If anybody wants it.
Okay. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Francis. Okay, Hudson Moon, are you primed? Are you ready?
Oh yeah. I'm here. I'm ready.
Good. All right, I will hand over to you, my friend.
Okay, this is the couple of first pieces from the new Craven called Craven Gets Flashed. Okay. Say cheese, Mr. Danger, you're getting flashed. What? Ah, geez, my eyes. Craven Danger staggered along the edge of the subway platform with his thoughts on finding some balance. Jenny Wilkins reached out, gripped him by the lapels of his overcoat, and hauled him in. I got you, Mr. Danger. The young lady guided the wobbly detective to a nearby bench and sat him down. Sorry, Mr. Danger. You were looking so beautifully pensive, standing there, that I couldn't help but take your picture. Beautifully pensive? I do like the sound of that, but a simple how do you do would have left you in better standing. Now my nerves have left town, may never come back. Could have sworn I saw them racing along the subway tracks a moment ago. May have been an hallucination. It's not my first jumping moment, you know. You'll like me better once you get to know me, Mr. Danger. People are usually charmed, and I may be the answer to why you're not as famous as you should be. Then answer me this. How many blinks did it take to get my sight back? I'm guessing this isn't the first time you blinded a guy with your flashy charm. And just who the heck are you? My name is Jenny Wilkins. I'm a recent high school graduate and a budding photographer, self-taught. I live above the photo shop across the street from your office. It's where I work on the weekend. They have me behind the register, but if this world had its head on straight, I'd be in the back room up to my elbows in photo developer. I got that stuff running in my veins. So much so that I saved up all my pennies and bought myself a proper camera. It's used and pretty beat up, but that's the way I like it. It's got character. I call it the Ouija. Ouija? After the tabloid photographer. He's a hero of mine. It's a speed graphic with a lot of extra flash bolts to capture those moments when you discover your play lying flat, a blood-splattered mess. My prey, listen, young lady. I dig up dirt on deadbeat husbands and adulterous wives. The pickings have been slim in recent months, and when I do need a picture, I bring along my baby brownie for easy concealment, and I hope to remember to put a film in. Baby brownie? That's for kids, Mr. Danger. You're missing out on all the fun. You're a pro, and there are dead bodies piling up all over town, and you could be the guy on top of it all. I figure what you need is a blood and guts photographer of your own to document all the blood-spewing cases you'll fall into. One good blood and guts picture in the paper, and you'll be the toast of the town. Or just plain toast if I'm a good judge of my own character. And what is it with you and blood? No, don't tell me. I don't want to know, but I have a pretty good idea what your game is. I'm guessing you got your hand on a police radio and have been tailing whatever screaming squad car happens by. And as soon as you catch up to whatever they're screaming about, you take out your Ouija and start popping pictures. Then the officer in charge, if you haven't managed to blind him, gives you the stink eye and a good swift tick, destroys your film, and sends you on your bulb popping away. I suppose your plan now is to have a soft touch like me involve himself in cases that would interest a tabloid reading bloodthirsty public. Well, thanks, but no thanks. I'm perfectly happy whiling away the hours being delusional about who I am. It's safer that way. Nobody but hand-wringing husbands and wives with a bone to pick about each other ever darkened my door. And the only time I plan on bleeding was when I'm having one of those shaky shave mornings after a night out at Delaney's. And after a few minutes with you, I'm ready to take on Delaney's again. You're so beautiful when you rant, Mr. Danger. You gave me goose flesh. It's like watching Bogart giving it to Mary Astor and the Maltese Falcon. Yes, sir, you got the goods all right. It would be my honor to someday work alongside you. Yeah? There goes that gorgeous, pensive face of yours. You glow with an air of masculine domination. It ought to be chiseled in stone for the world to admire. I feel like I'm being chiseled right now, and the answer is still no. But I'll tell you what I'll do. If it gets you off my back any quicker, you can tag along with me on the next yawn-inducing snoozer. Believe me, it'll have you resigning your lifetime membership in the Craven Danger fan club quicker than a Joe Louis left hook. Only it won't hurt so much. You're on, Mr. Danger. Here's my number. I'll be waiting. You're rising star, you. I really got to stop looking so pensively beautiful. Part 2. Camera set at f/16 and 1/200 of a second. Distance set at 10 feet. Bag full of photo plates and bulbs. All textbook Ouija. Then there's our refreshments. 2 cheese sandwiches, 2 knee-high orange sodas, 2 kosher pickles, and one hell of a private detective I get to fawn over for the next few hours. My only hope is that I'm not so mesmerized by your sleuthing persona that I'm unable to focus on my true purpose, which is to record your heroics and share it with a news-hungry New York. There's nothing heroic about waiting to take a photo of a cheating husband exiting the apartment house of his current love interest, Jenny. And didn't I tell you we had to be discreet? That camera you're lugging around is as big as a 4-slot toaster. How do you manage to stand up so straight? You should be hauling that thing around in a 4-wheeler. I may be 5'2", Mr. Danger, but I have the wing power of a roller derby queen from my arm wrestling days with my dad when I was a kid. You arm wrestle your dad? Yeah, for the last biscuit on the dinner table. I never did get the biscuit, my dad being partial to those hot buttery nuggets. A very sporting of your old man. The only thing I ever wrestled at the dinner table was my mother's liver and onions. She smothered it the best she could, but it still had a pulse, and it never got fought over either. Get ready, Mr. Danger. Here comes that flash again. What? Ah, geez, Jenny, what did I tell you about doing that? I know, Mr. Danger, I couldn't help it. Your face, when you reflect on a time gone by, should be on every lamppost in New York City. You should be the poster boy for the chronically pensive and courageous. It would brighten up the city and have crime on the run. At the moment, chronically blind would be more like it and getting more chronic by the minute. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, Jenny. I don't know why I agreed to you helping me spy on this lug in the first place. It's freezing out here and I'm on the verge of wetting myself. I should be sitting in a nice warm diner, brooding about the many ways I would approach this case. The actual doing is beside the point. I'd get around to it eventually. And now I'm back to being blind. If I had an empty tin cup, I could make a buck or two while we waited. Allow me to correct myself, Mr. Danger. Pensive, courageous, and a sparkling wit that Will Rogers himself would have envied. You really think so? Betty thinks I have no sense of humor at all. I don't know this Betty, Mr. Danger, but I can tell you that woman does not appreciate you in the manner you deserve. Does she help you off with your overcoat when you come in the office? No. Does she offer you a soothing hot towel when you've had a harrowing day? No. Does she pamper you with hot coffee and a fresh newspaper on your desk every morning? No. Dwayne from the coffee pot on the corner does that. Betty needs her quiet time in the morning. Once she sits at her desk, I'm not allowed to communicate with her until an hour has gone by. She says she has to focus on why she's there in the first place. Once that's settled, she opens my office door, smiles, and wishes me a good morning. I'm ready to put up with you now, with what she usually says. Then we're pals for the rest of the day. Enough of that for now, Mr. Danger. I spy our target at 12 o'clock. Let me put a fresh bulb in. You're gonna flash him? He's not even supposed to know we're here. That's the point, Mr. Danger. He'll never know what hit him. A half dozen flash pitches and he'll be walking into trash cans. It'll serve him right for cheating on a good woman. And he'll think twice about doing it again. Case over, Mr. Danger. Clear the way. I'm coming in. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Yeah, you've got quite a few more Craven fans there, Richard. There's a people want a radio show, I think, like now.
Thank you.
Superb. Very funny. Right. Celtic man, you're up next.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly. Yes.
You can't see me?
I can't see you.
Oh, that's definitely an advantage.
Is this tactical? Okay.
Oh, I love that. Right. I'm not asking if you can understand me, because obviously you can't, but here I go. So no point in hanging about. Right. She was framed by the light of a 30-watt bulb. Her shortness gave her stature. I couldn't have imagined her as a big, long drip of a thing with a face like a surprised trout. White hair tied back, hands and forehead deeply spotted as a seagull's egg. Dark, bud-like eyes that miss nothing. She wore a circular herringbone brooch on her blouse, and a no-nonsense herringbone tweed skirt fell below her knees. She spoke as if one of us was deaf, but with a soft "Boh, you all right there, dearie?" And she added before I could reply, "You need a warmer coat, you silly article." I held my hand up and twisted my face. "I think I've got." "You better come in then, dearie." She looked over my head. "I thought it was those kids knocking on the door, banging on the windows, letting the hens out, driving me mad, making everybody's life a misery." I passed on the hall, shoulders hunched, holding my hand out like an unwanted trophy, conscious of the stink and how marked my coats and boots were. The air inside the house had a brackish taste. She shuffled her feet in large brown brogues, with bright eye holes for the laces to attention. She sniffed somewhere above my head. "Oh, to be young and ripe like yourself." A long silence followed, broken by me asking where the toilet was. "Straight ahead. It's not much," she warned me. "But I thought you'd have known that after coming all this way for nothing." My heels clanked on the stone floor. It was cupboard-sized with a draught from the window, but the toilet pan was clean and redolent of vim and bleach. The hot water tap dripped, but the handle wouldn't budge. The sink had a bucket below it to catch the drops from the U-bend when I turned on the cold water. But the rough texture of carbolic soap and a straight rag of a towel hanging on a nail was enough to make me feel human again. I squatted over the pan and shivered, tried not to imagine spiders and beetles and things with scuttling legs lurking in the damp walls. "You all right in there, dearie?" she cried. "Fine," I lied. A quick splash of my hands, and as I came out the toilet, the old woman's level gaze met mine. "You'll be hungry, dearie." She brushed herself down as if she'd crumbs on her blouse. "I could make you a sandwich. I think I've got an open tin of tuna. The cat doesn't seem to like it much nowadays. They can be such funny buggers." "No, I can't see it became anything down." She sighed, squeezed her lips together as if I was a funny bugger. "You'll be wanting a cup of tea then?" After taking my coat, she edged open the living room door and ushered me inside. A comforting heat and dancing flames made me want to sit and sleep for hours and hours, days and days. I warmed the palms of my hands and sunk into soft cushioned seats facing the old woman's rocking chair. The black cat held up its whiskers, sniffing and staring at me from the cushioned seat. It jumped down and raised its head, looking up at me before springing up into my lap. It turned a circle, raised its tail like a whip, and showing its bum before scrunching down and settling, closing into the shadowed nest in my body. The old woman bustled in, carrying a tray with a spout of teapot hidden under a knitted cosy, 2 fine china teacups and saucers engraved with flowers, milk and sugar, and a plateful of shortcake and custard creams. She set it out on a footstool near the fire, acting as mum. "What do you take in your tea, dearie?" "Milk, 2 sugars." She handed over the tea cup and saucers. The cat's ear twitched and flattened at being disturbed. "You want a biscuit, dearie?" "Yes, please." The old woman placed the biscuits at my feet before the horse brass and coal scuttle. "They're delicious." I covered my mouth as I chewed. "Did you make the shortcake yourself?" She chuckled. "Well, me or Beattie's Biscuit Factory, dearie. Have another one. They'll just go to waste anyway." I took a sip of tea. Leaning over, took another biscuit. The cat settled back in my lap. She warmed her hands around her cup and motioned with her head. "Her nibs is taking quite a shine to you." "He's amazing." I stroked the crown of the cat's head, and it arches back to be stroked some more. "What do you call him?" "Ashes, and he's a she." "She's lovely." The cat purred with pleasure, its eyes blinking open and shut as I stroked the soft fur between its ears. "Some might think differently, dearie." "What does she do then? Catch mice?" I giggled, smiling down at the top of the cat's head. "No, she's just a bit over-familiar, dearie." The cat angled its head to look up at me with what seemed to like a human expression as his owner. The saucer clattered to the floor and broke against the fire surround. I caught the cup, but the tea splashed against my blouse. I'd have stood upright, shredding the cat like a wind-blown plastic bag, but its unleashed claws bit into my leg, warning me not to be too rash. "Oh, dearie, dearie, I'll need to clean that up." I settled back into the seat, hands shaking. The cat hissed at being disturbed as I put the cup down on the floor. "You want some more tea, dearie?" "No, thanks." I found my voice. "You're a witch then, like in Macbeth, and this is your familiar?" "Witchcraft, dearie. It's like any other craft, and I certainly wouldn't say I'm mistress of much. I could show you a universe in a jam jar, but you need to be able to look. It's there in the Bible, dearie." "I don't know the Bible that well." "Of course you do, dearie. Good Catholic girl like yourself. Adam and Eve. Adam, the first man mentioned in the good book. Men always accuse women of being witchy and being something she's not. Never underestimate the power of fear." She sucked on her lips and dipped a custard cream, making chew noises. "I mean, dearie, what kind of man counts his ribs, says he's one short, and you're creative from it? You might as well count your noses and come up short, accuse your flesh and blood of stealing it, or having 3 ears and claiming one went missing. I'd say he was half cracked. We try to humour him, don't we? We count our own ribs to see if we can give him one back. They're just too reasonable, too nice." "Suppose," I said, arching my back, the cat peering up at my face. "No suppose about it, dearie. They give him an apple to settle his stomach and he accuses us of poisoning him, being the devil. He didn't want to hurt his feelings by telling me we were here first, and we were looking for devils." "Well, that's another story." I see him rattling on again. "It must be boring for youngsters like yourself." "No, not at all. I don't know." "But you do know, dearie. We're sisters, wise women. I've been called all manners of things. Most folk think I'm a crazy old woman, and there may be some truth in that. But Shakespeare would have to look at his cooking pot again. Fill it a fiendly fenny snake, eye of nuke, toe of frog. All very laudable, but difficult to get." She hunkered down, sucking in her breath as she pushed towards the fragments of the saucer and threw them into the flames, muttering something under her breath I took to be a spell. Picking up the biscuits, balancing the plate on the mantelpiece. Have another biscuit, dear. I'll top up your tea. I'm no longer particularly hungry. I made as if I was going to stand and stretch and glanced over at the poker in the leg of the wrought iron stand. Ashes digging in made me settle back into the bunk cushions, waiting for the right moment. Can I ask you something? I can't find the right words, she tutted. I don't do most kind of things no more, dearie. I get all sorts here, but you're another sort entirely. If you want tricks, watch the telly. Some of the youngsters are just magic. Cleared my throat. I thought you'd know why I was here. You seemed to be expecting me. I thought you'd know too, dearie. Why don't you tell me? It's getting late. I looked out to the window into the growing twilight. The worst thing is, of course, I can't seem to shake off this damn cold. I've had it for ages. It makes me so drowsy, not like myself. She perked up a bit. Do you know any remedies? Lemsip, absent-mindedly stroked the top of the cat's hat as it purred with pleasure. That sounds marvellous, dearie. What aspect of the moon shall I take it under? That's it. Right, that's you can't see me, that's done. Right, thanks.
Jack, that was wonderful.
That was
Thank you,
fantastic.
mate.
Well done.
Yeah, absolutely knocks that out of the park. Great, the details in that are phenomenal. Thank you. Right, let's move on. Simon, are you on? Are you ready? Are you unmuted?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. You got a couple of pieces for us? Is that right?
I changed my mind, so I'm going to do one. But I'm also going to turn off my camera because I think that's a really good method of concentrating.
You do what you feel comfortable with, Simon, and yeah, I'll pass over to you.
So this one is called My Father's Bones. When my father died, I asked for the body and they put it in a bag. It was a lot heavier than I thought. I had imagined a certain weight, a weight I had previously scoped out in my mind. But for some reason, it turned out to be much heavier than that weight. Perhaps it was the fact that I took it all around with me, that the prolonged carrying made it feel so much heavier, heavier than it would have felt if I'd just been lifting it up for a few seconds. Perhaps, though, it was because the bag was a regular bin liner with no pre-constructed grip, making it very difficult to hold with such a large weight in, difficult to carry around all these places almost freestyle, having to switch hands and holding spot constantly and frequently, having to sling it periodically over my shoulder, having to make sure my father didn't fall out when I did so, since the bag wasn't tied. More importantly, having to make sure that the bag didn't break. I had to be very careful with it. I had to treat something so bulky and gross with an incongruous lightness of touch, with deftness and care. One sec. When I asked for the body, no one made a fuss. I hadn't thought about the ramifications. I hadn't thought about whether it was normal to take one's own father's corpse, but I wanted to take it, and so I just asked. It wasn't something absolutely pressing and urgent. It wasn't like I'd thought it out extensively whilst he was living, about all the ins and outs. It wasn't like I'd discussed it with him. It wasn't like I wondered whether I needed his permission. It was just more of a spontaneous thought once he'd gone, when I saw him lying there dead in the hospital, you know, that it might be a nice thing to take him. Besides, who else would want it? And like I said, it was met without objection. The only thing was that they didn't have a receptacle. I had to go home and find one. Though I had a hard time convincing my mother and almost gave up. She didn't like the idea to start with, but she's always had this bias against me. And I believe that the only reason she got so irate was because I suggested it in the first place. She'd had no particular plan for the body. She wasn't going to carry it around herself. And eventually she just gave way without really giving her permission. Not that I necessarily needed it, but the fact she walked off in mid-conversation made it fairly clear that she wasn't going to make a fuss. The first few days were extremely difficult, extremely arduous. I could hardly lift him at all. Have you tried lifting a dead body even for a second, let alone carrying it for more than a few paces? It's something that takes real getting used to. You need to develop strength in parts of your forearms and upper arms that you might never have used before. You'll be called upon to use bits of your body that your brain is resistant to engaging. You will have to work. You will have to struggle. The weight, to begin with, is something prohibitive. You will have to put the bag down almost instantaneously. But if you can just bear with the pain, if you can overcome the overwhelming desire to let the bag drop like a stone, then you can find that you can actually hold the weight. And that's the precursor for walking with it. First, you have to really be aware of your balance. Second, you have to know where your new center of gravity is, now that the bag is in one hand weighing you down. And it takes a lot of patience, resilience, and concentration to try and determine where this new center is. I felt like giving up so many times, but my desire to carry him round with me must have prevailed. I didn't have any doubts that I could do it. And at the time that it happened, I was working in an office outside of my home. Every day I would take him to work. Most people said nothing. Some asked. Some even knew somehow that it was my father. Some thought it was very sweet that I had the care and consideration to carry him around with me. Some became overwhelmed with emotion, beside themselves with admiration and joy. And they wanted to see inside the bag. They wanted to know what my father was like. Did we look alike? Were we cut from the same cloth, etc.? But how could they have known from only one look? How would they have been able to judge what my father was like, casting aside the fact that these people barely knew me, what with the way we don't show every side of ourselves where we're in the workplace? And so I thought the effusiveness was a little overdone. But for all those in favor, there were all those who took against. They thought it ridiculous, preposterous, sick, juvenile. All these words were the very words they leveled at me, not to mention that these same people often complained about my father taking up space. What difference did it make that I kept him in front of my legs, tucked under the desk? How could that impinge on anyone? They only knew he was there because they saw me come in with him in the morning. And what difference between having your father as opposed to 20 pairs of high heels and 4 bags of underused sportswear? At home, I kept him in the lounge. Most of the time I was oblivious. Most of the time I was so embroiled in one thing or another that I wouldn't notice he was there. It was only when I looked up that I would see the bag, and then I might wonder whether it was worth changing the bag or if it had settled badly in the particular configuration that I had left him in when I brought it in, that I might be inclined to smooth down the plastic, make sure the shape was okay. It is very rare that anything can poke out, but it has happened. And then I would just return to what I was doing at the time. For months, I carried around my father. For months, my life was inconceivably changed. But eventually he disappeared. The body disintegrated. I hadn't remotely thought about it. I had thought he'd be there forever, until one day I noticed the bag really wasn't as heavy as it had been before. It was markedly lighter. I wondered even if my father had fallen out. But no, he was still in there when I looked. I picked the bag again. I picked up the bag again, I should say. It was much lighter. In 3 months, he was gone. No one asked about the bag. No one noticed. I suppose I even forgot about it myself. But then I felt I needed or wanted a substitute, and I'm not sure which one, to carry something up. I needed something to carry around with me, something else, a substitute perhaps. There was no one I knew. No one had died or looked like doing so in the near future. I wasn't going to skulk around the hospices for unfamiliar bodies. But then I had the harebrained idea that I could carry around my mother. Granted, she was alive. She might not consent. She might not want to be in a bag all day and night. But what if I upgraded the bag to a suitcase? Something luxurious that would meet her snobby demands? What if I presented the proposition as something all the middle-class, snotty-nosed establishment people were biting people's hands off to get into? What if I referred to the Sunday Times magazine? What if I really sold it? Might she then concede? Well, she did. I've been carrying around my mother for almost 5 years. That was just after my father disintegrated. My mother's a totally different proposition. She's much lighter, of course, and she's not in a bin bag. I use a 75-litre rucksack and then double her back in so she fits and I can close it. The situation is so different to the one with my father that I hardly ever even remember I'm carrying her around with me. She hardly speaks or moves. Whereas my father was often a burden, my mother's a walk in the park. I sometimes wish my mother was heavier, but then not as heavy as my dear old father. And that's it, finally. Thanks for listening.
Bravo.
It's so much longer than I was like, come on, end.
Oh,
Just went on and on and on.
Simon, that is one hell of a short story. I read.
Come on. No, anyway, I was like, literally.
No,
You
it's.
don't realize how long these things are until you actually have to read them out. Like, what the fuck? I pity the people that have to listen to this shit.
People loved it, mate. That is a brilliant short story.
Anyway.
All right. Thank you. Glad you read that.
Lovely.
All right. Okay, Jane, you ready?
I'm free. This was written a couple of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, nice and clear.
This was written a couple of years ago in response to an inspiration point. The inspiration point was to take a song title, and I chose one that is arguably one of the most gloriously bad songs ever recorded. Those who are nearly as old as me may remember an old singer called Frankie Vaughan. His song was Tower of Strength. If you haven't heard it, it's the most wonderfully dreadful thing ever. So this story is called Tower of Strength. York's Tower of Strength was put in the broad centre of Parliament Street. Mrs. Brenton looked disappointed. Is that it? Her brother, Councillor Todd, frowned at her. What do you mean, is that it? Mrs. Brenton lived in Lancaster, having left the White Rose and married into the Red 26 years before. She was sceptical of her former home scramble to be part of the Tower of Strength project, which had been conceived by the new king as part of his coronation celebrations. Local communities, local strength, proclaiming our heritage was the slogan. Each community was invited to design their own Tower of Strength as the centrepiece of their proclamation, and bids for help with the funding could be submitted to the Tower of Strength Trust. York was out of the starting blocks early, having had a lot of practice building things that might appeal to tourists. The city's tower was designed, funded and constructed while other local authorities were still saying, a what of what? Despite her scepticism, Mrs. Brenton had thought that her brother, as a member of York's Tower of Strength Committee, might invite her to the official unveiling. When he didn't, she phoned him up and remarked how long it was since she'd been to stay. Councillor Todd blinked and said, well, any time, of course. So Mrs. Brenton came the next morning before her sister-in-law got organised enough to find an excuse. They went to see the tower that afternoon. It was a slim, solid block of stainless steel, 50 feet high. The north-facing side had the cross keys of St. Peter etched at about the 5-foot mark. The south side had Micklegate Bar, the principal gate in medieval times, the west side the Minster, and the east some wavy lines that represented the two rivers, the Ouse and the Foss. The block came to a point at the top, technically making it an obelisk, rather than its popular designation, the Crayon. In sunshine, the tower was dazzling, which meant that people couldn't see the cross keys, bar, minster, and wavy lines unless they stood at a certain angle, shaded their eyes, and squinted. In bad weather, rain streamed down the tower with nothing on the smooth surface to impede its path, which meant that people couldn't see anything at all, no matter where they stood. Remind me, said Mrs. Brenton, screwing up her eyes against the afternoon sun. How much did this cost? Worth every penny, said Councillor Todd stiffly. Oh, well, said Mrs. Brenton, I suppose it'll be a new backdrop for selfies and buskers. Councillor Todd shook his head. Not as popular for selfies as you might think, he said. People say they see reflections in it. Well, of course they see their reflections in it, said Mrs. Brenton. It's stainless steel. Not their own reflections, said Councillor Todd. Just reflections. And funnily enough, the buskers aren't keen either. They say they don't like having it behind them. They feel it's looking at them. Mrs. Brenton peered. It hasn't got any eyes. I know, said Councillor Todd. Councillor Todd took his sister round the corner to a tea shop in Newgate, the lane beside Shambles Market. They sat at a table by the window, looking out at people wandering among the stalls and taking pictures of the cobbles. It was a fresh spring day, a light breeze sending small white clouds scudding across the bright blue sky. After the tea and buns arrived, Mrs. Brenton said, "So, you and your committee got to meet the King." Councillor Todd flushed with pleasure. "We did." "What's he like?" "He's the King. What's he supposed to be like?" Mrs. Brenton shook her head and spread jam on her scone. Her late Majesty would have a fit to see all this nonsense, towers of strength, waste of taxpayers' money. Councillor Todd opened his mouth, but before he could either reply or bite into his Yorkshire fat rascal, there was a sudden flash in the sky. "What was that?" asked Mrs. Brenton. "I don't know." Councillor Todd stared out of the window. People were running up the lane. There were some screams. Shopping bags were ricocheting off the cobbles. Councillor Todd half rose. People at other tables were craning their necks to see past him. One of the waitresses went to the door and opened it. A man's voice shouted through the gap, "The crayon! The bloody crayon! It's alive!" Councillor Todd rose to his full height and attempted to extricate himself from chair and table legs. "Where are you going?" demanded Mrs. Brenton. "I must go and see what's happening. I'm an officer of the council. It's my duty to help." "Help who? Do what?" demanded Mrs. Brenton. "Convince a load of hysterical people a stainless steel tower can't be alive? Sit down. I'll phone the police." She took her mobile from her handbag. Councillor Todd hesitated. One of the fleeing women outside fell on the cobbles, and seeing the faces staring at her from the window, scrambled into the tea shop on her hands and knees. The waitress closed the door firmly after her. Councillor Todd helped the woman to a chair. "What happened?" The woman's eyes were wide and brimming with tears. "It opened." "What opened? The tower?" The woman nodded and gripped Councillor Todd's hand. "There were a big flash, and it cracked open, and all these arms came out." "Arms?" said Councillor Todd. "This woman says arms came out of it," said Mrs. Brenton into her mobile. "No, I haven't seen it. For heaven's sake, I don't know the nature of the incident. Just send someone." She put her phone down on the table and frowned at it, as if it were being particularly unhelpful. "Arms," said the woman, "like tentacle things, all bright and shiny with fingers on the end. And this figure." "What figure?" asked Councillor Todd. The woman hiccuped. "Enormous, like a giant, all glowing, like that thing with all the snakes on its head." Councillor Todd looked helplessly at his sister, who had always been the reader in the family. "The Medusa," said Mrs. Brenton. The woman nodded and closed her eyes. Councillor Todd squared his shoulders. "Whatever's going on here, I have a duty to people. I'm going to have a look." Mrs. Brenton wore the expression of any older sister whose little brother needs rescuing from himself. "Oh, honestly, can't you just wait for the police?" "No, I can't. I have a duty." Mrs. Brenton sighed. "For heaven's sake, come on then. Let's get on with it. You first." Outside, the crowd had disappeared, with only the odd straggler limping up the cobbles with terror in their eyes. To the left of them was the silent market, stalls disarranged and abandoned in the rampage. To the right, where Patrick Pool led along to Church Street, a child's buggy, empty and overturned, sprawled desolately in the gutter. The door of the Valhalla bar opened a crack and a face peered out. Then there was a hoarse yell of "Shut it!" The head jerked back, and the door was slammed. Their footsteps echoed on the cobbles. Mrs. Brenton stopped. "Can you smell that?" Councillor Todd sniffed the air. It's like metal railings on a hot day," said Mrs. Brenton. Councillor Todd looked at his sister curiously. "I don't think I've ever smelt metal railings on a hot day." Mrs. Brenton raised her head as they started walking again. "Look at that sky." Councillor Todd followed her gaze. A thick, undulating layer of goose-down cloud brooded over the area of Parliament Street. Behind it, they could see faint, brief scintillations of light, like currents arcing between giant synapses. Mrs. Brenton suddenly put her hand on his arm. They were about to come out into the street. "Eric," She was interrupted by a stentorian yowl that invaded their bones and percolated through the empty market stalls, impregnating the stones themselves with yearning. Mrs. Brenton shivered. Councillor Todd covered her hand with his own unsteady one. It'll be all right, Deirdre. After all, what they're saying, it can't be true. It's a load of nonsense, must be. She managed a thin smile. Far away, a police siren sounded. Of course, it's nonsense, pure nonsense. Come on, lad, what are we waiting for? They rounded the corner. Oh, my God, said Mrs. Brenton. End of part 1.
Well done.
Jane.
Thank you.
Excellent as always, and beautifully read as well. Okay. I'm going to read something now in an act of narcissism, and then Ewan is down to read. So we'll probably finish about 5 past, maybe 10 past 9. I hope that's okay for everyone. Okay, so this is just a chapter from a book that I've written called Pigeon Variations. This is the chapter's called Conversation with a Bird of Prey. It does have swearing. I've toned it down a bit, but if you find that difficult to listen to the swearing, then maybe go on mute or make a cup of tea. I just thought I'd give you forewarning. Okay, so Conversation with a Bird of Prey. Le Colombian was hunched in a corner, perched on his soiled bed, half man, half bird. The transition to a bird of prey was slower than other categories. Scientists couldn't explain why. Cheers, said Pizer, raising a glass to Le Colombian. I wanted to tell you I'm leaving. Le Colombian ruffled its feathers. I've met a girl, Pizer continued. She's going to let me live with her for a bit until I get myself straight. He drank the lager. What she doesn't realise is that I'll never be straight. This is who I am. This is what I do. I'm not going to change for anybody. Why should I? The Colombian made rapid squawking sounds. His body was transitioning as Pizer spoke. The skin openly bled as Leurakis full of feathers pierced through like blades. What's Colombia like? Asked Pizer. I only know it from Romancing the Stone. Have you ever seen that film? Total classic with Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner and Danny DeVito. Oh, I suppose there's that drug dealer too. Pablo, what's his chops? Fuck. What's his name? Escobar. Pizer drained a can and opened another. There was a bottle of whiskey next to him too. He took a swig. The Colombian's room resembled an unclean cage, the floor mushy with maggoty goo and filth. It was an effort not to vomit. Pizer knew he'd definitely be blown chunks had he not possessed the foresight to pop a couple of little fellas before entering the room. Do you know something? I've only ever been to Paris. I've never been anywhere else abroad except for a weekend in Paris. Maybe one day I'll live abroad. I want to. It's something I've thought about. It was 2 a.m. Arthur and Blanca had returned to Poland. There was a new tenant who had moved into the house share. Pizer didn't know much about him, except he was in his 60s, Irish, and claimed to be an actor who did gardening on the side. More likely to be the other way round, whatever. Pizer's plan, as per usual, was to grab what stuff he could and do a runner. There was no money in the Colombian's room, no nothing really. An old-fashioned suitcase with clickety locks, the metal faded and scratched. I know things aren't amazing for you at the moment, Pizer said, but you're going to be a top-notch bird. Think of what it's going to be like, soaring high among the clouds, living in the mountains, owning the sky. You know what? I'd swap places with you in a heartbeat. It was true. Pizer was adamant he wasn't going to change his ways for no one, and at the same time, he was so fucking bored and fed up. His drinking and drug taking were completely out of control. He wanted to stay as fucked up on his current binge for as long as he could, as he was terrified of the come down when he finally burnt out. It was going to be a humdinger of a downer. Why did you come from Colombia, he asked. What were you running from? Was it over drugs? Pizer drank. Although I bet Colombians hate the drug cliche, I don't blame them. We have our own here. The cliches of the working class, for one, repeated by middle-class wank stains on TV, the newspapers, books and films. I've been thinking about the working class a lot lately, whether I am one of them or not. Shall I let you into a secret? I fucking hate the working class, especially wankers who describe themselves as working class. It's bullshit, a con designed to keep you in your fucking box. Know your place, son, where you can all fuck off. The working class as a concept was invented by academic middle-class wankers. What do you make of that? The Colombian was in agony. It was etched across every segment of skin and sinew in his body. Pizer said, This come back to you. Did you come here to study English for the summer? Was that your plan? Looking to better yourself like all the other students, build yourself a future. Education maketh the man. Of course it does. Let me tell you, there is no future for the likes of you and me. No one wants to know us. We're the driftwood, the lowlife, the nobodies. Unless you're born into money and know the right people, it's never going to be any different. I'm talking about the silver spooners, the Tories, the pinkers, the polo playing ponces who quaff champagne and sail the Atlantic, bumming each other in wood-panelled cabins. Pizer picked his nose and flicked it at a maggot. You know, I do find myself thinking that one day everything will be all right, that I'll wake up and I won't feel terrified and sickened by who I am. Do you ever get that sensation? I suppose you're going through it now. It's a head fuck. At least you came to England with good intentions. I'll give you a point for that. I bet there was a girl too. Her name was Jenny, right? An Aquarius with webbed toes on her left foot, or was it her right? She had a phobia of buttons, couldn't stand them. She'd buy you t-shirts and hoodies to stop you wearing shirts, and you were so in love in the beginning. It was like an obsession, this desire to be together. I want to grow old with you, she whispered in bed one night. And you fucking believed her, didn't you? What a cunt. Believing that stuff, this fantasy that the pair of you would stay in love and would live together until you were both in your 60s, 70s and beyond. You wanted to think it could be true, that life could be like that, and for a brief moment in time it fucking was like it. That bliss of total trust and acceptance, heavenly almost. How you would cuddle in bed on a Sunday morning, sharing secrets, laughing, fucking and drinking hot tea and eating buttered toast. It was perfect right up until that moment you cocked everything up by being the cunt that is you. Am I right, Eagle Boy, Hawk lad? Do tell me if I'm getting you wrong here, doing you the proverbial biographical injustice. Swigging the whiskey, Pizer considered popping to Mazepan to bring calmness to his thoughts. Do you fucking yearn, he said, to lay on a sofa with her and watch a film? Are you desperate to come home with her and unpack shopping and make yourselves crackers with strong cheddar cheese and dollops of chutney? Do you remember the times you had chicken fajitas with fried beans, hummus and salad? Are you completely fucking bamboozled by how you threw away intimacy and trust? Trust, man. All over some misguided notion that she was tying you down, that she was stopping you being the man you wanted to be. A man who, it turns out, was also a fantasy, a fiction. He never existed in the first place because you never had the fucking nous and guts to create him. The poor prick was in pain. Pizer could see it in what was left of the Colombian's eyes. He got up and pushed the window open as far as it would go. You fly out of here when it happens, he said. Don't let the bastards catch you. Pizer went to pat the Colombian on the head, but the birdman started squawking loudly. All right, I'm off ski. Picking up the half-full bottle of whiskey, he saluted the creature on the bed. Good luck. I envy you. I hope you know that. Being a bird of prey is more than simple men like you and me could ever hope for. It's a gift, mate, from a higher power. And I'm not talking about fucking God or any of that religion shit either. In the hallway, he picked up a bin bag and his sports bag, dropped his key onto the wicker mat and headed to his new abode. It occurred to him that with each place he moved to, he took fewer belongings with him. The end. Thank you.
Bravo.
Right. Kind of expected to look up and everyone had gone.
No,
All
that
right.
happens next.
Ewan, I'll pass over to you. Tell us a little bit about your book, because you've got a new one out, and so, yeah, just sort of set the scene for us a little.
Yeah. Okay. As some of you probably know, I've got a second novel out. It's a sequel to the first one, which was called Gibbous House, which was a bit strange in as much as it was full of Victorian language and rather less than Victorian behaviour. This is the sequel. It's set 20 odd years later, and the protagonist, who survives the first book, ends up on the Mississippi River, getting involved in all kinds of things, including the beginning of the American Civil War and the Underground Railroad. It all sounds very worthy, but I can assure you it's not. This section I'm going to read, I hope it doesn't last too long for you, is set on one of the riverboats that he travels on the Mississippi on. And he's just about to watch a fantastic performance by a troupe of travelling actors on board the riverboat. If you're ready, brace yourselves. Presently, their footwear clumping on the tabletop serving as the stage, the entire troupe entered and formed a circle on it. The two midgets had ceased hostilities, at least to the extent of placing the giant woman between them and reaching up to join hands with her. The circle formed by the actors resulted in a view of what was perhaps Catamol's best side. I noticed the inexpert patching on the xanthous material of his coat, into which he had changed for the performance. Catamol nodded his head. The midgets bellowed, in a voice quite disproportionate to their size, "Mucha mierda!" The cadaverous fellow, still in his morning weeds, gave a timid "merde." The giant woman sang a coloratura "mierda," and I feared for the glass in my hand. This was followed by the obese fellow's "dreck." Catamol and Copeland chorused "break a leg," whereupon the actor manager clapped his hands and said, "Places, please." As might have been expected, Copeland, the crookback, retook his seat at the harmonium, and with great flourishing of his bony arms, coaxed forth still more sounds reminiscent of the visit of a fox to the hen house. The twins sat cross-legged at the tall woman's knee as she made a comfortable settle out of the enormously fat fellow's back, just as soon as he lowered his bulk to its hands and knees. The solemn-faced mourner stood behind the tall woman, placing a hand upon her shoulder, though he had to reach upward a little to do so. The whole presented some gross parody of a familial tableau. Catamol stood centre stage and addressed the audience as follows, although this gives no flavour of the peculiarity of his numerous accents. "Ladies and gentlemen, I superbiate at this unwanted and irreproducible opportunity. Nay, salivate at the prospect of the serendipitous good fortune that you, our blessed audience, are about to enjoy, namely, viz, to wit, that is to say, the Sagaric Catamol Minstrel Show and Compendium. Please lay palm to palm in a cacophony of manual approbation as we offer for your delight and delectation with scientific applications to the banjo and occasional help from the harmonium, an old favourite made famous by the Virginia minstrels." The assembled crowd, including the one-eyed Jack playing poker, let out a roar of approval that seemed quite unnecessary in view of what followed. The mournful bone rack fingered a banjo dexterously, if less than tunefully, whilst the remaining members of the tableau bellowed a jaunty ditty, exhorting the excited audience to steer well clear of a somewhat boisterous party by the name of Old Dan Tucker. In truth, for the most part, the minstrel show minded me of nothing other than a penny gaff, save that there seemed to be no constraint of time. Catamol's role as master of ceremonies, unlike that of such a fellow presiding over any show in the rear of a Chiswick public house, did not include random termination of the acts in an effort to generate more income. In spite of this, the whole of the show was of so poor a standard to require a fee paid to the owner of the riverboat to perform, rather than a transfer of monies in the opposite direction. The songs thankfully persisted through no more than 2 or 3 examples of lively, if crude, ditties. At this point, the actor-manager took centre stage once more and gave forth thus. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, I lay before you the finest example of its kind, an exemplar of the art of stumpular oratory. Please make more welcome for Caractacus Monroe, with a monologue entitled The Jews in Egypt." This last word was accompanied by yet another of the harmonium players' approximations of a chord. And this was the finest representation of the sounds of Poultryside made to that point. Catamol made way centre stage, and the mournful-looking beanpole took position. The monologue was unintelligible to me, while the crowd laughed loud and long from the very beginning. To my ear, the man appeared to be speaking in an exaggerated version of slave dialect, though I doubted any bondservant ever spoke so incoherently. After 15 minutes, I could make out more than the occasional word. Happily, this period coincided with that allotted to the purported entertainment. Monroe's final words were, "Let my people go." I looked over at Miss Shepherd, who whispered to herself, "Go down, Moses." At that very moment, a ruffian stumbled before me and landed, as if by chance, in the empty seat between Miss Shepherd and myself. If the man was not drunk, he had chosen to bathe in a vat of whiskey, perhaps in an effort to ward off some infection. He surely was unlikely to be infected by any unwanted company, though any efficacy against infirmity remained in doubt. He fixed me with one blear and bloodshot eye, and amid much expectoration opined that it was a good show so far. If I could not agree with this entirely, there was no doubt that the show at that point became exceedingly worse. Catamol, with accustomed prolixity and proximity to good usage, informed us all that he was about to give us something from the Scottish play. Sadly, it was not the scene where Macduff returned triumphant with the head of the protagonist. Most unfortunately, the head of the troupe chose to murder the tyrant somewhat early by committing grave injury to his speech on the occasion of seeing the dagger. The crimes committed by this miserable creature against the Bard of Avon began as followed. Is this a dagger that I see before me? An handle too, o'er my hand? Come, let me clutch ye, I have me not, yet I see still. Art you not fatal vision sensible, to feel an utter sight? The spirited fellow next to me jumped to his feet, suddenly more sober, at least inasmuch as he did not immediately fall over. He bellowed sufficiently to overpower the mighty projections of Catamol. Say, ain't that Macbeth fella supposed to be a Scotchman? The actor Catamol gave a theatrical stagger, although the blanching of his face seemed genuine enough. He threw up his hands and jerked his head toward the fat and mournful members of his company. Get him out! Get him out! I was doubtful of the pair's ability to carry out this task, but I was much mistaken. The blubberous individual moved the quicker of the two, much to my surprise, but the majority of the manhandling fell to the black-garbed skeleton, and it in no way overfaced him. The rest of the audience seemed to treat the ejection of the erstwhile critic as part of the general entertainment, roaring encouragement as he passed their row, his booted feet barely troubling the bare boards of the deck. Was it fancy that the faintest splash preceded the longest and most deafening applause of the afternoon? I resolved to keep my opinions of the show to myself, at least within earshot of the actors. The final part of the farrago appeared to be an approximation of a short play. Catamol played the owner of a contemplation, one Simon Legree, whilst the rest of the players played various enslaved unfortunates. One of these was named Uncle Tom and was played with such pathos by the lugubrious Caractacus Munro that I was very hard put not to laugh aloud at his demise. For some reason, this death signaled the end of the play, and Uncle Tom was resurrected in the Lord just in time to take part in an altogether superfluous reprise of old Dan Tucker. The audience rose to grant this last a rousing ovation. Miss Winona Shepherd took the opportunity to slip a folded sheet of paper into my hand, whilst holding a finger to her lips and shaking her head. I made my way on deck, leaving the fools to their applause. That's enough of that for a start. Oh, look, 6 minutes past. Not bad, eh?
Little Mark Twain says bravo.
Brilliant, Rich, brilliant.
Ewan, thank you. That was a lovely way to wrap it up. Okay, well, we've had Dante, we've had Aardvarks, we've had our fill of Craven. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it for the evening. Thank you, everyone. That's been an absolute pleasure, and it's a variety. It's just wonderful to see the faces behind the names as well. And I thought there was some great readings tonight. Just a big round of applause for Jane and Claudine as well and the work they do at ABCtales.
And to you, Mark, for organising it all.
Thank you, Mark.
What you guys do is awesome. Right, back to lockdown living, I think, in the UK.
It was great. Everybody was great.
It's lovely.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks. Really good.
No, not. It was a pleasure. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Thank you.